Hey guys, I'm back with predictions for UFC Fight Night 90, Dos Anjos versus Alvarez. The last event, UFC Fight Night 89, McDonald versus Thompson. I was 10 for 13, 1,345 for the event, and that moved me up to 2,982 overall for the year. So I'm very happy about that. Obviously, moves me closer to my goal of finishing inside the top 500 at the end of the year. And I think that I pretty much nailed the main event in my previous video. Check it out for yourself, see what you make of it. It doesn't happen often, but when you're right, you got to take ownership of it. You gotta gloat. Yeah, I'll just quickly scroll through my picks here. I'm not gonna do any talking, but just to show you what my picks were. Alright guys, on to the predictions. Hey guys, back with predictions for UFC Fight Night 90, Dos Anjos versus Alvarez on Fight Pass. There's been some complaining about the fact that there's a title fight on Fight Pass. I have no problems with it. I do like the pay-per-view experience, the pay-per-view atmosphere, but come on, $10 for Fight Pass versus $60 for a pay-per-view, and even just, if you have to choose between this and the regular Fight Pass card that's an overseas card with a bunch of low-level prospects debuting in the UFC, you get to choose between that and a Fight Pass card headlined by a title fight. I'm definitely taking the title fight. And the fact that it's on a weekday makes it that much better that it's on Fight Pass. For those of us who have to work, Fight Pass really helps us out here. So I have absolutely no problem with this being on Fight Pass. And the fight card, I think it'll be fun. There are a lot of fun action fights, maybe not very meaningful fights outside of the main event. But I think it should be fun. So I'd say a better than average fight night card. I mean, aside from the fact that you're getting a title fight in the main event. But first fight at welterweight, Vicente Luque versus Alvaro Herrera. I have to take Luque here pretty easily, although I think Herrera is still an unknown. But Luque really redeemed himself in his last fight against Hayder Hassan, not only from his first loss to Hayder Hassan, where he just got out-brawled and really couldn't get anything going against him, but also the loss he had before that fight to Michael Graves, where he got outworked and out-wrestled and again had no real answer. But in the second fight against Hayder Hassan, showed real crisp, technical, precise striking, walked him down, hurt him on the feet, jumped on the anaconda choke and put him away, and that's what I expected to see from him against Hassan in the first fight. So I thought it was a great performance, really redeeming performance, and he has submission skills. We've seen that on Tough, submitted Nathan Coy, who's a solid wrestler. But yeah, Herrera, he got a surprise TKO win over Vernon Ramos, who is the semifinalist on Tough Latin America. And it was surprising because Herrera was just, a guy who lost in the first round and lost pretty dominantly to Hector Aldana, was taken down for the whole fight. And Aldana did not go on to do well and didn't even get a slot in the finale. And he just ran over Vernon Ramos, the semifinalist. So it was a surprise performance. He obviously has some power, packs a punch. But if that's all I have to go off of, I have to take Luque, who seems to have a more complete game and just seems to have come up against a higher level of opposition. So definitely taking Luque here. All right, next up at bantamweight, Marco Beltran versus Reginaldo Vieira. Tough Latin America contestant versus a tough Brazil 4 finalist, and I'm taking Reginaldo Vieira. Marco Beltran, pretty ineffective on the feet, kind of a non-existent striking game, and he's okay on the ground, primarily a grappler. His last fight against Ning Guangyu, I just rewatched it because I forgot that fight had even happened, and I was very surprised to see that Beltran had a W on his record over Ning Guangyu, because I remember that I took Guangyu in that fight. So I rewatched it, and not the whole thing. It was a terrible fight, extremely uneventful. Both guys just kind of striking at air. I think Beltran hit a takedown at one point. Guangyu hit a takedown on him, but a very uneventful fight, and just reassured in my mind that Beltran does not have any kind of striking game, and can't really implement his ground game all that well. And Viera seems far more consistent, has a much more functional striking game, a really aggressive, scrappy fighter. And I said he was the finalist on Tough Brazil, actually the winner, and I did pick him in that fight against Doane Lopes. And I just think that aggression and striking is going to be too much for Beltran to handle here. I think Viera also got a submission win in the semifinal on Tough Brazil 4. I think it was, I want to say Bruno Correa, I think, but I'm taking Viera here. I don't think Beltran has any chance here, really. Vieira just seems like a far more skilled submission threat, submission fighter, and striker. So definitely going with Vieira, big. All right, next up at lightweight, Gilbert Burns versus Lucas Sajewski. Not much to say here. I'm taking Burns, and it seems like a pretty lopsided matchup. Lucas Sajewski didn't look terrible in his debut against Nick Hein, and that is a really tall order for a UFC debut. And he didn't lay down. He was in there the whole time, but didn't really get much done either. Just got outstruck thoroughly by Hein. And Gilbert Burns has a deeper game. He's deadly on the ground. That fight against Cowboy Oliveira was getting outstruck badly the whole fight, and came alive in the third round. All he needed was one chance to get it down, and he submitted him. So I think Burns can get back on track here. Had the bad loss to Rashid Magomedov in his last fight, where he got badly outstruck, but that was against a really good striker that he clearly wasn't ready for. So I still think Gilbert Burns is a really strong prospect, talented fighter, especially on the ground, and maybe against Magomedov, he was really outclassed, but I wouldn't even say he's a bad striker. I think his striking is okay for a developing prospect. So I'm taking Burns by submission. All right, next up at bantamweight, Felipe Arantes versus Gerard Sanders. This is kind of an interesting fight to me, a tougher one to call. But I have to go with Arantes. Arantes is a very up and down, inconsistent fighter. We've seen him out-wrestled by Andre Fili, outstruck and out-wrestled by him, and just kind of outworked in general. And also outstruck on the feet by Kevin Souza. Didn't have any kind of range striking to deal with Souza in that fight. But he is a threat on the ground. We saw that in his last fight against Yves Jouban, where he got slammed and was really getting, the fight taken to him. But he pulled out that armbar off his back against Jouban, and put him away. That was in the first round, I believe. So he is dangerous on the ground and does have a TKO ground and pound win against Pepe Castro. And I think that was also off of a reversal from his back. So he can create the finish. He is a dangerous fighter. Gerard Sanders, I was thinking this guy didn't deserve to have a spot in the UFC. 2 first-round losses. Got submitted by Pedro Munhoz. I think he shot in for a takedown, and Munhoz submitted him with the guillotine. But this guy was just destroyed by Yozdeni Cedeno, who is not a UFC caliber fighter. Just got nailed with something crazy, I think, and put out in the first round of that fight. So 2 bad first round losses, but then his last fight against Russell Doane, I was really able to out wrestle him, control him. There were some back and forth scrambles in that fight where I thought Doane kind of looked impressive, but Sanders definitely won on position. And that's where I think he could have success and possibly win a decision here with the size and strength. I think he could nullify the submission game of Arantes, who always seems to be on his back before he turns the tables and gets the dominant position on the ground. But I think Arantes, just having fought way more in the UFC and against better competition, should probably be able to pull out the win here. Create some kind of finish, catch. I think he's going to catch Sanders in a submission or reverse him and get off some ground and pound. So I like Arantes, but I do think there's a chance that Sanders out wrestles him. All right, at bantamweight, Russell Doane versus Pedro Munhoz. Munhoz was really off to a great start. His first couple of UFC fights, like I just said, had the quick submission win over Gerard Sanders, had a quick TKO win over, what was the guy's name? Matt Hobar. And Russell Doane also had some good wins over Leandro Issa, submitted the jiu-jitsu guy, and he's a scrappy striker. Got a win over Marcus Brimage. I thought Brimage won that fight, though. And performed well against Yuri Alcantara, even though he kind of got dominated and nearly choked out in that fight. But that last fight against Sanders was not good. He had a few good scrambles, but mostly couldn't get up off of his back and seemed way too willing to grapple with the guy who was just able to hold him down and nullify any kind of submission game. I think Munhoz should be the more technical striker, but Doane is really aggressive and scrappy. And on the ground, I think Munhoz is probably the more skilled submission fighter, although, again, Doane is an aggressive and scrappy grappler, so I could see Doane pulling it out, but I just think the skill level of Munhoz is higher. Munhoz is coming off of a bad loss to Jimmy Rivera, but Rivera has far more sound fundamental boxing than Doane. I'm going to take Munhoz here. I just think he's a little more skilled, a little more technical everywhere. So I'm going to take Munhoz. All right, at bantamweight, Anthony Birchak versus Delano Lopes. I already talked about Lopes a bit. I got to take Birchak here. Lopes was the finalist on Tough Brazil 4. Seems like a guy who is more dynamic than he is consistent. I think he got a quick guillotine finish in the house. But then against Reginaldo Vieira, it was a close fight, but just kind of got outworked, and Vieira was just able to beat him, being the more aggressive, high-volume fighter. And Birchak is high-volume, very aggressive, had a great, very quick, devastating knockout win over Joe Soto. I thought was competing well against Almeida before just getting knocked out cold. So I really like Birchak here. I don't see Lopes being able to survive long enough to out-grapple him. or that's where I think his strength would lie in this fight. But Birchak just seems like too dangerous, too aggressive a striker. So I'm going to take Birchak here by knockout. All right, at lightweight, John Makdessi versus Mehdi Baghdad. This to me is a complete mismatch. Makdessi, I think, definitely we've kind of seen his ceiling. Has had some bad losses, especially the Cerrone loss. His ground game, I think, is suspect. I remember that Dennis Hallman win years ago where Hallman just came out, got him down, put some ground and pound on him and choked him out. But Makdessi is a really technical striker, has knockout power, can outstrike other decent strikers. Like against Sam Stout, Darren Cruikshank, he really won the striking battle from distance. And Mehdi Baghdad, I really don't see why he's in the UFC. Didn't impress me at all on Tough. Lost to a guy who was trying to take him down, and he was just trying to brawl, and he was complaining after the fight that the guy didn't brawl with him. That tells me he just doesn't have a well-rounded game. And then Chris Wade kind of proved that by just dominating and destroying the guy on the ground. I think Makdessi either gets a knockout or just has a pretty easy time outpointing him on the feet. Makdessi is a really solid technical striker. So and he's got years of UFC experience and has been in there with Cerrone and a ton of other veterans compared to Baghdad, who's coming off of his first UFC fight. So and who didn't have any success on Tough. So definitely taking Makdessi. All right, next up at welterweight, Mike Pyle versus Alberto Mina. This one's interesting. I'm going to take Pyle. Pyle's really burned me before. But, when Pyle loses, it's against prospects who are younger than him, more powerful, more dynamic, more athletic. The Jordan Meehan knockout. Matt Brown knocked him out. And then, years ago, Jake Ellenberger and Rory McDonald. But Mike Pyle won a decision against Story, maybe deserved to lose it, but he took Story's best punches, survived, and if you can't knock him out, he will come back and he will put heat on you. He's really good in the clinch, good knees, and dirty boxing from the clinch, and he has power himself. Showed that against Sean Spencer. And if he can survive against Sean Spencer, who was a younger, more dynamic, athletic fighter, if he could take his best punches, survive, and then come back to put him away, I think he can do that against Alberto Mina, who is not, at least to me, a really high-level prospect. He's 34 himself. Does have knockout power. We saw that against Shinsho Anzai, although I would say that the level of opposition there is extremely questionable. And then got a split decision over Akiyama in his last fight, and I don't remember the fight all that well, but I do remember thinking Akiyama won that fight, and I think Akiyama was able to take him down on several occasions throughout that fight. And we know that Pyle is a very good grappler, good at getting a dominant position, has good ground and pound. So I like him to win this. You do have to, worry about that chin. He's suffered a lot of knockouts up to this point, but Mina is definitely, not a Matt Brown, not a Jordan Meehan. So I think Pyle, with the veteran savvy and he seems to be getting better technically, even though he's really old at this point, almost 40, I think. Seems to keep getting better, and he's still a crafty, powerful striker. So I'm taking Pyle to get a finish here. All right, next up at lightweight, Joseph Duffy versus Mitch Clarke. I think Duffy just runs over him. Clarke is tough. He managed to survive against Chiesa. Even when Chiesa had his back and had a body triangle in. He survived. Did get that crazy win against Iaquinta. Iaquinta gave him an opening, and he jumped on it with a kind of an unorthodox choke. So he can capitalize given the opportunity, but Duffy just seems like a way higher level fighter. Clarke doesn't have much of a striking game. I don't think he has the wrestling game to take Duffy down, and we've seen Duffy is a really good submission fighter in addition to being a really good striker as well. Did have that setback against Poirier, but Poirier is a really high-level fighter, and I think Duffy just kind of tears this guy up on the feet, and then on the ground I would still give him the advantage, even though we've seen good submission prowess from Clarke, but I really like Duffy here. Not much more to say than that. I think he's just a much higher class of fighter than Clarke, and I think this is a pretty lopsided mismatch, so I'm definitely taking Duffy big, and I don't really see Clarke having any chance. All right, at welterweight, Alan Jouban versus Belal Muhammad, debuting fighter. Muhammad is, so I won't make a pick. I like Jouban. He's a good kickboxer, has finishing ability, he's athletic, although I did think he really struggled way too much against Matt Dwyer. Got dropped and tagged at many points throughout that fight. Kind of resorted to some very sloppy striking and brawling in that fight. But I think he's good, but I can't make any kind of prediction here because I don't know Belal Muhammad. So co-main event, heavyweight, Roy Nelson versus Derek Lewis, and I'm taking Derek Lewis here. That might not be a popular pick, and I picked against Lewis. I picked against him against in the Pesta fight, in his last fight against Gonzaga. He still has a problem, getting taken down, but he's surviving there. He's getting back to his feet. I thought for sure Gonzaga would be able to pound him out or submit him, given one opportunity to get on top, and Lewis survived. He got back to his feet, and I just think Nelson is really losing a step every time out athletically. That fight against Jared Rosholt was terrible. That is not something I think we would have ever seen from the Nelson of old. If this was the Nelson of 2 to 3 years ago, would definitely take him over Derek Lewis. But I think, I don't buy that he fought that way against Rosholt because he was scared of the takedown. I just think he's losing a lot of foot speed at this point, and just doesn't really have the confidence in his hands, and he's been knocked out by Mark Hunt, which maybe a couple years ago we would have thought was impossible. And Derek Lewis has big power. Derek Lewis did get exposed against Matt Mitrione, but Roy Nelson isn't nearly that technical. We just haven't, like the fight against Mitrione, Nelson's win over Mitrione a couple years ago. We haven't seen Nelson really fight like that or get a win like that since that fight, where he just lets his hands go and he's really able to find his opponent's chin and put a lot of volume on them. He had the Mark Hunt loss. Looked terrible against Jared Rosholt. Josh Barnett, Overeem, those losses. Since that Mitrione win, his only wins have been over Congo and Big Nog, and then his last fight against Rosholt. So I'm taking Lewis here. He's just, the guy on the rise. Very dangerous, very powerful, and I think he goes right at Nelson and clips Nelson before Nelson is able to hit him. Nelson might still have a hand speed advantage, but I think at this point Lewis is the more athletic guy. Nelson just looks like he's getting slower. I do worry if Nelson chooses to grapple with him. I do think Nelson could take him down and at least hold him down, but we haven't seen that since his tough days. He did take down Crow Cop to pound him out on the ground, but we haven't seen much of a takedown game from Nelson at all, really, in the UFC. So I'm not sure if he goes to that here. I think he's going to want to slug it out, and I just kind of think Lewis beats him to the punch, and at this point probably hits a little harder than Nelson. So I'm taking Derek Lewis. Nelson just seems like he's losing a step. Yeah, I like Derek Lewis here. All right, and then the main event, lightweight championship fight, Rafael Dos Anjos versus Eddie Alvarez. Taking Dos Anjos, and I think he gets it done pretty dominantly. I think it's going to look like the Cerrone fight. Alvarez is tough. I think he might be able to last a little longer than Cerrone, but not much longer. I think Dos Anjos gets this done within 2 rounds. Alvarez has really been fighting in a way where he's putting all of his energy and focus into exploiting his opponent's weaknesses, which luckily for him, his last 2 opponents have had the same weakness, and that was wrestling. And it's not even like he's taking these guys down at will, but he's just shooting in on their legs, getting them up against the fence, and then trying for the takedown, and did get it a couple of times against Pettis, but I don't see that working at all against Dos Anjos. I think Dos Anjos will have good enough takedown defense to thwart that, to keep himself from getting taken down. I think he could turn the tables on Alvarez and take him down. But if he's given any space, any time on the feet, I see him absolutely destroying Alvarez. Even in the Pettis fight, and some people thought Pettis won that fight, he was picking apart Alvarez in open space, and for every second that fight was on the feet. Alvarez barely made that style of cage control, going for the takedown, getting in on the legs. He barely made that work against Gilbert Melendez. So I don't see how that works at all against Dos Anjos. And if he tries to strike with him, Dos Anjos is just way too technical, has way too good a Muay Thai game at this point. He's a good combination striker, has great hand speed. We saw that in the Pettis fight, and just has great cardio, great wrestling, mixes the strikes and wrestling together way too well. I think he's really is a champion, but I think he's probably pound for pound one of the best guys in the UFC right now. And Alvarez, even though he squeaked out some wins, has not been impressive, has not been dominant. I mean, just compare his fight against Pettis to what Dos Anjos did against Pettis. So I don't think it's a competitive fight. I think Dos Anjos gets it done within 2 rounds, taking Dos Anjos by TKO. All right, guys, those are my predictions. Thank you for watching. Check out or follow me on Twitter. Link is in the description, and I will be back soon with predictions for the TUF 23 finale. I'm probably going to do a prediction video for that card, excluding the finale fights, and I'll do another video just for the finale fights, so that I can get that out earlier, and then I'll have my 200 video, and we have a couple other events in July after that. And then look out for a collaboration video that I'm going to be doing with best MMA picks and MMA Savant. We're going to do a Google Hangout, do a rundown of UFC 200. That's going to be fun, so check that out, and I'll let you guys know when that's happening. Probably this Friday, I think, but I'll let you guys know. And see you guys later. Bye.